Ambassador Jiho Kim walked through the massive crystal hallways of the Galactic Council Station. His black diplomatic uniform felt heavy on his shoulders, weighted down by 50 years of service to beings who barely saw him as more than a useful tool. The artificial gravity here was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like he was floating just above the polished floor. The council chamber doors stretched 30 meters high, carved from a single piece of blue crystal that came from the homeworld of the Altarians. Jiho had been through these doors hundreds of times, always carrying orders for humanity to fight someone else's war. Today would be different. Inside the chamber, delegates from over 1,000 different worlds filled the curved seats that rose up like a massive amphitheater. Some looked almost human, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were so alien that Jiho still couldn't figure out which end was their head after decades of meetings. They all had one thing in common, though. They all expected humans to do their dirty work. Minho Park stood beside Jiho's chair, his tablet showing tactical displays of the latest mission the council wanted to assign. Minho was young for a military advisor, only 35, but he had seen enough orbital bombardments to make him look older. His hands shook slightly as he scrolled through the targeting data. "The civilian casualties will be enormous," Minho whispered to Jiho in Korean. "They want us to hit refugee camps. They're calling them rebel strongholds, but the intelligence clearly shows families with children." Jiho nodded without looking at the tablet. He had already seen the reports. Yuna, Lee, their intelligence officer, had been feeding him classified information for months. The pattern was always the same. The council would find a problem, label it a threat to galactic peace, and send human fleets to eliminate it with overwhelming force. The Vorthak representative clicked forward on his insect-like legs. Kelthanor was 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had been warriors once, but they had given up fighting when they joined the council 200 years ago. Now they preferred to let humans do their fighting for them. "Honored delegates," Kelthanor's voice came through the translation system as a series of musical tones. "We face another crisis that threatens the stability our council has maintained for centuries. The mining world of Kepler 442b has erupted in violent rebellion against lawful mining operations. Holographic displays filled the air above the chamber floor. Jiho watched as images of the mining world appeared, vast strip mines that had turned green forests into brown wasteland. The miners were taking everything valuable from the planet, leaving nothing but poisoned soil and dead rivers. "The rebels have attacked mining equipment and threatened the safety of off-world workers," Kelthanor continued. "They claim the mining operations are destroying sites sacred to their primitive culture. This cannot be allowed to continue. The stability of the entire sector depends on the resources from this world." More images appeared. Jiho saw the rebels, families carrying homemade weapons, farmers with tools converted into simple guns, children barely old enough to walk hiding, behind barricades made from furniture. These were not soldiers. These were people trying to protect their homes. "The Council requests that the Terran Federation deploy appropriate forces to restore order," Kelthanor announced. "Standard suppression protocols should be sufficient. Orbital bombardment of rebel strongholds followed by ground occupation to ensure compliance." Jiho stood slowly. Around the chamber, delegates turned their attention to him. Some looked bored. They had seen this same routine countless times. Others leaned forward with interest, eager to see how quickly the humans would agree to handle another problem for them. "Before I respond to this request," Jiho said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "I have a question for the honored delegates." A murmur went through the crowd. Humans were supposed to accept their assignments without questions. That was how the system worked. In the past year, the Terran Federation has conducted 46 military operations at the request of this council, Jiho continued. Each time, We were told these operations were necessary for the good of all species. Each time, we were told that only human forces had the capability to handle these threats. The chamber was getting quieter. Even the delegates who had been chatting among themselves were starting to pay attention. I have reviewed the intelligence reports for all 46 operations, Jiho said. In 31 cases, the targets were civilian populations whose only crime was resisting the economic policies of council member species. In 12 cases, we were asked to suppress independence movements on worlds that had been colonized without their consent. In the remaining 3 cases, we destroyed entire ecosystems to clear land for resource extraction. Yuna Lee sat in the observer section, her face carefully neutral. She had been the one to compile those reports, digging through classified files to show Jiho the truth about what humanity had been doing in the name of galactic peace. The pattern is clear, Jiho said. The Council does not call on human forces to defend the innocent or protect the weak. You call on us when you need someone killed and you want to keep your own hands clean. The Altarian delegate, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid named Veltara, activated her speaking platform. Ambassador Kim, surely you understand that these operations serve the greater good. The stability of galactic civilization requires difficult decisions sometimes. Whose greater good? Jiho asked. The mining companies who strip worlds bare? The trading cartels who exploit primitive species? The colonial administrations who treat entire populations as slave labor? Angry voices started rising from different parts of the chamber. This was not how council sessions were supposed to go. Humans were supposed to take their orders and leave. Minho stepped closer to Jiho, his hand moving unconsciously toward his sidearm. The tension in the chamber was growing dangerous. Some of the more aggressive species were making threatening gestures, and security forces were moving into position around the exits. For 50 years, Jiho said, raising his voice above the noise, humanity has served as the Council's military force. We have fought your wars, conquered your enemies, and carried out your executions. We have done this because we believed we were part of something greater than ourselves. The chamber was falling, silent again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. This was the silence that came before violence. But we were never part of this council, Jiho continued. We were your weapons, tools to be used and put away when the job was done. You gave us targets and expected us to destroy them without question. You never asked us to help build anything. You never asked us to create or protect or heal. You only asked us to kill. Kelthanor clicked his claws together in irritation. Ambassador Kim, if you have concerns about specific operations, there are proper channels for review. But the current crisis requires immediate action. Will the Terran Federation accept this assignment or not? Jiho looked around the chamber one more time. He saw species that had grown fat and comfortable while humans did their fighting for them. He saw beings who spoke of peace and civilization while ordering the destruction of anyone who inconvenienced them. He saw the faces of creatures who thought humans existed only to serve their needs. He reached up and unpinned the Earth insignia from his uniform collar. The small blue and green disc had been worn by every human ambassador for 5 decades. It represented humanity's place in the galactic community, their acceptance as a junior partner in the great work of civilization. Jiho placed the insignia on the speaking podium in front of him. The Terran Federation hereby formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, he said. Effective immediately, we renounce all treaties, all agreements, and all obligations to this body. We will no longer serve as your executioners. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates were shouting in dozens of languages. Some were demanding that Jiho be arrested. Others were calling for immediate military action against Earth. A few were asking if this was some kind of negotiating tactic. Jiho turned and walked toward the exit, followed by Minho and the rest of the human delegation. Behind them, emergency sessions were being called. Council security forces were scrambling to figure out what authority they had over a species that was no longer a member. In orbit above the Council Station, Captain Taiyang Cho received the coded transmission on his ship's communication system. 3 short pulses, followed by 2 long ones, followed by 3 short pulses again. It was the signal he had been waiting for. "All human vessels, this is Captain Cho," he broadcast on the emergency frequency. "Execute withdrawal protocol. All ships are to depart Council space immediately. Any vessel that cannot comply should transmit distress signals and prepare for emergency evacuation." Across the galaxy, human ships began powering up their engines. Some were deep in Council territory, weeks away from the nearest neutral system. Others were engaged in active military operations, fighting battles they would now have to abandon. All of them received the same message: come home. The withdrawal took 3 days. Some ships had to fight their way out when local council forces tried to stop them. Others were allowed to leave peacefully by commanders who were too confused to know what else to do. A few ships never made it home at all, lost in the chaos of the evacuation. But when it was over, humanity was gone from Council space. For the first time in 50 years, the galaxy's most effective military force had simply walked away. On Earth, President Kang Min-so addressed the planet in a broadcast that was also transmitted to every human colony and station throughout known space. "Today we have chosen freedom over servitude," he said. "We have chosen our own path over the comfortable cage of Council membership. The galaxy will test us in the days to come, but we will face that test as free humans, not as anyone else's weapons." In the council chamber, emergency sessions continued through the night. For the first time in centuries, they would have to handle their own problems without human fleets to call upon. None of them had any idea how to do that. 6 months had passed since humanity walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. Hanaseo sat in her new office on Luna Base, watching data streams flow across multiple screens. As Earth's Director of Galactic Affairs, her job was to monitor what was happening in the galaxy now that humans were no longer there to fix everyone's problems. The results were worse than anyone had expected. Her assistant, Kyung-hee Park, brought her the latest intelligence reports. The young woman looked tired. They all did these days. Keeping track of a collapsing galaxy was exhausting work. "The Zephyrian Trade Consortium has officially collapsed," Kyung-hee said, placing a thick folder on Hana's desk. "Their last convoy was destroyed 3 days ago near the Altair system. No survivors." Hana opened the folder and read through the casualty reports. 200 merchant ships destroyed in the past month alone. The raiders who had been attacking Zephyrian convoys were getting bolder, knowing there were no human patrol, ships coming to stop them. For 30 years, human cruisers had escorted the major trade routes. Pirates and raiders had learned to avoid areas where Earth's navy operated. Now that the humans were gone, every shipping lane in Council space had become a hunting ground. "What about their defense forces?" Hana asked. "Don't they have their own military?" Kyung-hee laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They have 12 patrol boats and a customs station. The consortium spent all their money on trade ships because they knew humans would protect them. Now they're finding out what that protection was worth." Wu Binjiang had tried to warn them. As Earth's former trade liaison, he had spent years telling Council species that they needed to build their own defenses. They had all dismissed him as paranoid. Why build expensive warships when humans would fight for free? Now Wu Bin was working in Earth's Department of Colonial Development, helping human settlements prepare for independence. His warnings about galactic collapse had been ignored by the Council, but Earth's leadership was listening very carefully. Sumin Kang worked the night shift in Luna Base's communications center. Her job was to monitor the emergency frequencies that Council worlds used to call for help. The traffic had increased dramatically since humanity's withdrawal. Tonight was typical. A mining colony in the Vega system was under attack by raiders. A farming world near Centauri was dealing with a slave rebellion. 3 different systems were reporting pirate fleets moving through their space. All of them were begging for human intervention. None of them were going to get it. Luna Base, "This is Governor Velmakri of the Tau Ceti Agricultural Collective," came a desperate transmission. "We are under attack by escaped slave labor forces. They have seized our orbital stations and are threatening to crash them into our cities. We require immediate military assistance." Suman typed out the standard response that Earth had been sending for 6 months. "This is Luna Base acknowledging your distress call. The Terran Federation is no longer a member of the Galactic Council and cannot provide military assistance. To Council territories, we recommend you contact Council Defense Command for support." Everyone knew Council Defense Command was useless. They had 3 ancient cruisers and a communications station. Their job had always been to coordinate human fleets, not fight actual battles. The real problem was on worlds like Verdania, where the Clixon swarm had returned after 30 years of forced hibernation. Captain Do-Hyun Lim commanded Earth's long-range reconnaissance ship Soul's Pride, and his reports from the Outer Rim were terrifying. "The Clixons are expanding faster than our models predicted," Do-Hyun reported during his weekly briefing to Earth Command. "They've taken back 12 systems that humans helped liberate 3 decades ago. The local defense forces can't even slow them down." Admiral Soyeon Ko studied the tactical displays showing Clixon fleet movements. The insect-like aliens had always been aggressive, but they had learned to fear human weapons. Human tactics had stopped their expansion cold and forced them back to their home systems. Now they were moving again, and this time there was no one to stop them. "What about Verdania's planetary defense grid?" Admiral Ko asked. "We helped them build those orbital platforms." "The platforms are still there," Do-Hyun replied, "but they don't know how to use them. The Verdanians never bothered to train their own people on the weapons systems. They expected human technicians to operate everything. This was the pattern everywhere. Council species had grown so dependent on human protection that they had forgotten how to protect themselves. Their military forces were mostly ceremonial, designed for parades and honor guards rather than actual fighting. The worst news came from the hegemony fringe, where 3 entire star systems had gone completely silent. No communications, no trade, signals, no distress calls. Nothing. Jaehyun Moon commanded the stealth reconnaissance ship Busan Runner. His job was to investigate the silent systems without being detected. What he found there made his blood run cold. "All 3 systems show signs of massive orbital bombardment," he reported to Earth intelligence. But this wasn't random destruction. Someone systematically destroyed every military installation, every communications relay, every government building. The civilian areas were left mostly intact. Intelligence analyst Yoonji Nam studied the reconnaissance photos from Moon's ship. The destruction was too precise, too organized to be the work of pirates or raiders. This was military conquest on a scale the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. "Who could do this?" asked Director Hana Seo during the briefing. "The Council doesn't have enemies this powerful." "Actually, they do," Yoonji replied grimly. "We've been monitoring long-range sensors, and there are signs of massive fleet movements beyond the galactic rim. Something big is coming back." The something turned out to be the Thek Collective, an ancient enemy that had been driven into exile 100 years ago. They had been waiting, building their strength, preparing for the day when humanity would no longer guard the galaxy's borders. The Thek were different from other species. They didn't want territory or resources. They wanted revenge. A century ago, human fleets had helped drive them out of civilized space after they had attempted to conquer the entire galaxy. Now they were back, and there were no human fleets to stop them. Captain Min-jae Ryu was monitoring deep space sensors from Earth's orbital defense platform when he detected the first signs of the Thek return. Massive energy signatures moving in. Formation. Heading straight for Council space. "Admiral, you need to see this," he called to Admiral Ko. "Long-range sensors are picking up at least 200 heavy cruisers moving toward the Meridian sector. The energy signatures match Thek technology." Admiral Ko studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. 200 cruisers was a small invasion fleet by human standards, but it was larger than the entire Council defense force. And this was probably just the advance guard. The Thek had spent a century preparing for this moment. While the Council grew soft and comfortable behind their human shield, the Thek had been building weapons, training soldiers, and planning their return. President Kyungmin-oh received daily briefings on the galactic situation. Each report was worse than the last. Trade routes collapsing, colonies falling to raiders, ancient enemies returning from exile. The galaxy was falling apart without human intervention. "Sir," said his chief of staff, Ji-woo Choi, "we're receiving formal requests for military assistance from 47 different worlds. Some of them are offering significant territorial concessions in exchange for protection." President Oh looked out the window of his office at the earth below. Somewhere down there, children were playing in parks, families were having dinner together, people were living normal lives without worrying about galactic politics or alien invasions. "What's our response?" he asked. "The same as always, sir. We acknowledge their requests and remind them that we are no longer part of the Council. Their problems are not our problems." But even as he said it, Ji-woo wondered how long that position could last. The chaos spreading through Council space would eventually reach human colonies. Earth might have withdrawn from galactic politics, but they couldn't withdraw from the galaxy itself. The first major disaster came when the Draconian Empire, one of the Council's most powerful members, suffered a complete military defeat. Their proud battle fleets were destroyed by a coalition of former slave species who had been waiting decades for revenge. Commander Seoko Kim monitored the battle from Earth's intelligence station on Pluto. The Draconians had been one of the most arrogant Council species, constantly demanding that humans handle their minor problems while they focused on important matters like art and philosophy. "The Draconian home fleet is breaking apart," Seoko reported. "Their flagship just exploded. It looks like they're trying to surrender, but the rebels aren't accepting it." The rebels had good reason to refuse surrender. The Draconians had enslaved entire species, strip-mined their worlds, and used human fleets to suppress any resistance. Now that the humans were gone, old debts were being paid with interest. Within a week, the Draconian Empire ceased to exist. Their core worlds were occupied, their government dissolved, their military scattered to the stars. A 1,000-year-old civilization had collapsed in 7 days. The message to the rest of the galaxy was clear. The old order was finished. Without human enforcement, the Council's authority meant nothing. Species that had been suppressed for generations were rising up, and there was no one left to stop them. Trade began to break down as shipping companies refused to risk their vessels in increasingly dangerous space. Colonies started going hungry as supply convoys stopped coming. Entire sectors declared independence from the Council, knowing there were no human fleets coming to force them back into line. On Earth, public opinion was divided. Some people wanted to help the struggling Council worlds. Others argued that the galaxy's problems were not humanity's responsibility. A growing number believed that the Council deserved whatever was happening to them. "They used us for 50 years, said Senator Hyben Park during a televised debate. "They treated us like weapons, not allies. They never asked for our opinions, never listened to our concerns, never treated us as equals. Now they want us to come running back and save them. Why should we?" Her opponent, Senator Ming-Yu An, argued for limited humanitarian intervention. "Yes, the Council treated us badly, but there are billions of innocent people suffering because of this chaos. Children are starving. Colonies are being destroyed. Can we really just stand by and watch?" The debate raged across Earth's media networks, but the government's position remained firm. Humanity had chosen independence, and independence meant not getting involved in other people's wars. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to burn. Ancient enemies returned from exile. Suppressed peoples rose in rebellion. Pirates and raiders grew bold without human patrols to fear. The careful balance that had kept the peace for centuries was collapsing. In her office on Luna Base, Director Hana Seo compiled her monthly report for the president. The statistics were grim. 57 worlds had lost contact with the Council. 12 species had declared independence. Trade volume was down 60%, and military conflicts were increasing every day. At the bottom of her report, she added a personal note: the galaxy is learning what it was like before humans arrived. They're discovering that peace isn't natural. It has to be enforced, and they no longer have anyone willing to enforce it. The Council was about to send their first formal apology to Earth, but it might already be too late to matter. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council met for what many believed would be their final session. Speaker Vexthala floated above the assembly floor, her ethereal form flickering with the stress of trying to hold together a dying government. The great chamber that had once housed delegates from over 1,000 worlds now held fewer than 600. Many species had simply stopped sending representatives. Others had formally withdrawn from the council entirely. A few had been conquered or destroyed and could no longer send anyone at all. Honored delegates, Speaker Vexthala began, her voice carrying across the mostly empty chamber. We face the gravest crisis in our recorded history. The fabric of galactic civilization is unraveling before our eyes. In the Earth Intelligence section of Luna Base, Dong-hyuk Song watched the council session through intercepted broadcasts. As Earth's former military attaché, he knew most of the delegates personally. Many of them had once looked down on humans as useful but primitive barbarians. Now they looked terrified. The reports began immediately. Each one was worse than the last. The Meridian Confederation's representative, a tall insectoid creature named Klixvar, spoke first. His mandibles clicked nervously as he delivered his report. The Void Reapers have taken 40% of our territory in the past 6 months, he announced. Our defense fleets have been completely destroyed. We estimate that 15 billion of our people are now under Reaper occupation. Murmurs of shock went through the chamber. The Meridian Confederation had been one of the Council's most stable members for 3 centuries. They controlled dozens of star systems and had always been wealthy enough to buy their way out of trouble. Now they were begging for help that no one could provide. Captain Min-jae Ryu, monitoring the situation from Earth's deep space observation post, had watched the Meridian defense fleets die. Their warships were beautifully designed, with elegant curves and artistic details that made them look more like sculpture than weapons of war. They had lasted approximately 4 hours against the Void Reapers. The Meridian ships fought like they were in a parade, Min-jae reported to Admiral Soyeon Ko. Perfect formations, careful maneuvers, everything by the book. The Reapers just swarmed them and tore them apart. The Reapers were not interested in elegant combat. They were pirates and raiders who had spent generations learning to avoid human patrol routes. With the humans gone, they had emerged from the dark spaces between systems like a plague of locusts. The Crystal Hegemony's delegate spoke next. The beautiful crystalline being seemed to have lost some of its luminous glow, as if fear was literally dimming its light. We have been forced to abandon our outer colonies entirely, the crystal delegate announced. The savage tribes of the Rim have overrun 6 of our worlds. We cannot defend territories that are weeks away from our core systems. Dong-hyuk remembered the savage tribes. Human Marines had fought them 20 years ago, driving them back into the galactic rim where they couldn't threaten civilized worlds. The tribes were brutal fighters who treated warfare as a religious experience. They had been contained for 2 decades by the knowledge that attacking Council worlds would bring human retaliation. Now, they were expanding again, taking revenge for years of forced isolation. The most shocking report came from the Draconian delegate. The proud reptilian species had always been one of the Council's most arrogant members. They had frequently complained that humans were too violent, too aggressive, too quick to use force. The Draconian Empire no longer exists, the delegate said quietly. Our home world has fallen to a coalition of former slave species. Our military has been destroyed. Our government has been dissolved. I am the last official representative of, my people." The chamber fell silent. The Draconians had ruled an empire that spanned 50 star systems. They had enslaved dozens of species and used human fleets to keep their subjects in line. Their fall had taken only 3 weeks. Dr. Yunji Nam, analyzing the intelligence reports from Earth, understood what had happened. The Draconians had created too many enemies and depended entirely on human protection to keep those enemies under control. When the protection disappeared, all their former victims had attacked at once. "It's not just military conquest," she explained to President Kyungmin. During his daily briefing. "It's coordinated revenge. Species that were suppressed by council policies for generations are all rising up at the same time." The pattern was repeating across the galaxy. The council had maintained peace not through justice or fair treatment, but through the threat of human military intervention. Remove that threat, and decades of accumulated grievances exploded into violence. The council's own attempts at military action had been disasters. Their peacekeeping fleet, assembled from volunteer ships provided by member species, had been annihilated in their first major engagement. Commander Soyeon Kim had monitored that battle from Earth's sensor network. The Council fleet had approached their targets with all the tactical sophistication of Academy cadets playing war games. "They fought like they expected the enemy to follow rules," she reported to Fleet Command. "Formal challenges, organized battle, lines, careful maneuvers designed to minimize casualties. Their opponents just surrounded them and opened fire. The enemy fleet had been a mixed group of raiders, rebels, and exiles. They had no interest in honorable combat or minimizing casualties. They wanted to win, and they did. Captain Min Jae Ryu had studied human naval history extensively. He understood that the Council species had forgotten the basic truth that humans had never been allowed to forget. War was not about honor or glory or following rules. War was about survival. "They've forgotten how to fight," he reported to Admiral Ko. 50 years of having us do their dirty work, and they've lost every military instinct they ever had. They think combat is supposed to be civilized. The Andromedian Syndicate had been watching and waiting for exactly this moment. Humanity's oldest enemies, they had been driven to the edge of the galaxy decades ago by human fleets. Now they were back with a vengeance. The Syndicate's offensive was methodical and brutal. They swept through the outer spiral like a wave of destruction, conquering system after system. Their message to the galaxy was clear. The age of Council dominance was over. Intelligence Officer Kyung-ho Park intercepted Syndicate communications from Earth's monitoring station on Titan. Their broadcasts were being transmitted to every world in the galaxy, designed to spread panic and encourage surrender. "The humans are gone," the Syndicate leader announced in a message that reached billions of beings. "Your protectors have abandoned you. The Council that once commanded fleets now begs for mercy from raiders and rebels. Submit to the Syndicate, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Many worlds chose to submit. The alternative was to fight an enemy that had spent 40 years preparing for revenge, with no hope of outside assistance. President O received his daily intelligence briefings with growing concern. The chaos in Council space was spreading toward the borders of human territory. Earth's colonies were still safe, but that might not last much longer. "Sir," said his intelligence director, Eugene Choi, "we're tracking at least 12 major conflicts in progress. 3 species have been completely conquered. 7 more are under siege. The galactic economy has essentially collapsed." The collapse was visible in the sensor readings from Earth's observation posts. Space traffic had decreased by 70%. The great trade routes that had connected thousands of worlds for centuries were now empty corridors, haunted by pirates and refugees. Captain Ji-Hyun Lee commanded one of Earth's border patrol ships, monitoring the edge of human space for signs of trouble. Her reports showed increasing numbers of refugee ships fleeing from Council territory. "They're desperate," she reported. "Some of these ships are barely holding together. Families packed into cargo holds, running from wars they can't fight and disasters they can't escape. Earth's policy was to provide humanitarian aid to refugees while carefully avoiding any military involvement in their conflicts. Refugee camps were established on several human worlds, but no weapons or military assistance was provided. The message was clear. Earth would help individuals, but governments that had once treated humans as expendable tools were on their own. Speaker. Vexthala made an unprecedented decision during the emergency council session. For the first time in council history, they would send a formal delegation to Earth, not as superiors addressing a subordinate species, but as equals seeking an alliance. The announcement caused an uproar in the chamber. Conservative delegates argued that negotiating with Earth as equals would destroy what remained of council authority. Liberal delegates countered that they no longer had any authority left to destroy. "We must face reality," Speaker Vexthala announced. "The galaxy is burning around us. Ancient enemies have returned from exile. Our own member species are rebelling against our authority. Entire civilizations are collapsing into chaos." The speaker paused, her ethereal form flickering with emotional strain. "We drove away the only species capable of maintaining galactic order. Now we must ask them to help us, not as subjects, but as partners." The vote was close. 412 in favor of sending a delegation, 308 opposed. Many delegates abstained, unwilling to support either position. Prime Councilor Zelchiron of the Altarian Republic was chosen to lead the delegation. His species had been among the most vocal critics of human aggression over the years. Now he would have to swallow his pride and ask for help from the people he had once dismissed as primitive warmongers. War Speaker Thromdok of the Centaurian clans would accompany him. The Centaurians had always considered themselves superior warriors, despite never having won a major battle without human support. Now their homeworld was under siege by rebels they had once oppressed. The delegation would depart within days, but many council members doubted it would matter. The galaxy had been without human protection for a full year. Ancient hatreds had been unleashed, old alliances had crumbled, and new powers were rising from the chaos. On Earth, President O prepared for visitors he had no intention of welcoming warmly. The Council had treated humanity as disposable weapons for 50 years. Now they wanted to negotiate as equals, but only because they were desperate. Director Hanasio compiled the final intelligence report before the delegation's arrival. The statistics were devastating. 68 worlds had been conquered or destroyed, trade volume was down 80%, and over 200 million beings were now refugees. "The Council is dying," she concluded in her report. "They're coming to us because they have nowhere else to go. The question is whether we want to save them or let them face the consequences of their own choices." The delegation departed for Earth amid protests from the few remaining conservative council members. Many believed it was already too late. The galaxy was remembering what it had been like before humans arrived to enforce the peace, and the memories were more terrible than anyone had imagined. The council delegation arrived at Earth expecting to find a species willing to negotiate. Instead, they discovered that humanity had not been idle during their year of independence. Fleet Admiral Jiwan Park greeted them aboard the newly commissioned Incheon Station, a massive orbital fortress that dwarfed their diplomatic vessel like a mountain beside a pebble. Prime Councilor Zelchiron stepped off his ship with carefully controlled dignity, but his blue skin had taken on a pale shade that indicated deep anxiety among his people. War Speaker Thromdok followed behind him, the proud Centaurian warrior trying to hide his shock at the size of the human station. Admiral Park was polite but distant as he escorted them through the station's corridors. The delegation passed rows of weapons that were clearly more advanced than anything in council space. Automated defense turrets tracked their movement with mechanical precision. Human soldiers in powered armor stood at attention, their faces hidden behind tactical visors. "Welcome to Incheon Station," Admiral Park said in perfect galactic standard. Secretary Kim is waiting for you in Conference Room 7. Secretary of Defense Byung-ho Kim sat at a plain metal table in a room with no decorations. He wore a simple, black uniform with no medals or symbols of rank. His expression was neutral as the council delegates took their seats across from him. Prime Counselor Zel Chiron, Secretary Kim said with a slight nod. War Speaker Thromdok, thank you for making the long journey to our space. I understand you have something to discuss. Zel Chiron had prepared speeches about mutual cooperation and shared galactic responsibility. He had planned to appeal to humanity's better nature and their history of service to galactic civilization. Looking at Secretary Kim's cold expression, he realized none of that would work. Secretary Kim, Zel Chiron began carefully, the galaxy faces unprecedented chaos. Ancient enemies have returned. Trade routes have collapsed. Entire civilizations are falling to forces that threaten all sentient life. Yes, Secretary Kim replied. We've been monitoring the situation. Please continue. The delegation had brought holographic displays showing the scope of the crisis. Zel Chiron activated them, filling the room with images of burning worlds and destroyed fleets. The data was overwhelming. Hundreds of conflicts, millions of casualties, entire sectors falling into darkness. The Council recognizes that we may have taken humanity's contributions for granted in the past, Zel Chiron continued. We are prepared to offer full recognition of human sovereignty, expanded territorial rights, and a significant voice in Council decisions. Secretary Kim studied the holographic displays without emotion. In exchange for what exactly? Limited military assistance, War Speaker Thromdok said quickly. Just enough to stabilize the most critical situations. We're not asking you to resume your previous role. Just help us restore basic order to the galaxy. Secretary Kim leaned back in his chair. Prime Counselor, War Speaker, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want humanity to send our fleets into combat to save Council worlds from the consequences of their own policies. We want humanity to help preserve galactic civilization, Zel Chiron corrected. Whose civilization? Secretary Kim asked. For 50 years, humanity fought your wars while you called us primitive and violent. We suppressed rebellions while you profited from the oppression that caused them. We destroyed anyone who inconvenienced you while you spoke about peace and enlightenment. Intelligence Chief Su-Young-an entered the room carrying a thick folder of documents. She placed it on the table in front of the council delegates without speaking. These are detailed reports on every military operation humanity conducted for the council over the past 5 decades, Secretary Kim explained. Intelligence Chief An compiled them after our withdrawal. Would you like me to read some highlights? Zel Chiron's pale blue skin grew even paler. He had a feeling he knew what those reports contained. Operation Cleansing Dawn, Secretary Kim read from the top document. The Council requested human forces to suppress terrorist activities on the agricultural world of Ceres Delta. Our ships arrived to find farmers protesting the seizure of their land by off-world corporations. We killed 17,000 civilians, including over 3,000 children. War Speaker Thromdok shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His people had been the ones who requested that particular operation. Operation Stable Markets, Secretary Kim continued. The Council needed human intervention to restore trade stability in the Vega sector. We discovered that stability meant helping slave traders recapture escaped workers who had fled to neutral worlds. We returned 42,000 sentient beings to slavery. The holographic displays still showed burning Council worlds, but now they seemed less like disasters and more like justice. Operation Peaceful Resolution, Secretary Kim said. The Council wanted human forces to mediate a dispute between the Draconian Empire and their subject species. Mediation consisted of orbital bombardment of civilian areas to terrorize the subjects into submission. We destroyed 12 cities and killed 2 million people. Captain Jinsu Bayek entered the conference room as Secretary Kim finished reading. The captain was in charge of escorting the delegation on their tour of Earth's facilities, but his real job was to make sure they understood exactly how much humanity had changed. "If you'll follow me," Captain Beck said politely, "Admiral Park has arranged for you to see our shipyards." The tour was designed to send a message. Captain Bayek led them through construction facilities that stretched beyond the horizon. Massive dreadnoughts under construction dwarfed the largest ships in Council space. These were not peacekeeping vessels or patrol craft. They were instruments of war on a scale the galaxy had never seen. The Sol Crusader-class dreadnought, Captain Back explained as they walked past a ship that was still being assembled. Displacement, 4 million tons. Primary armament, 16 heavy antimatter cannons. Secondary systems, plasma torpedo tubes, point defense grids, and electronic warfare suites. Zelkiron tried to hide his shock, but the specifications were terrifying. A single one of these ships could destroy entire fleets of conventional Council vessels. "How many are you building?" he asked. "This facility is producing 12 per month," Captain Back replied. "We have 7 similar facilities in operation with more under construction." The mathematics were simple and horrible. Humanity was building a fleet large enough to conquer the entire galaxy. War Speaker Thromdock had spent his life studying military tactics. He recognized a preparation for total war when he saw it. "Admiral," Thromdock said carefully, "these ships seem designed for offensive operations rather than defensive purposes." Captain Beck smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, so we became strong." The tour continued through weapons testing facilities where new technologies were being developed. Energy weapons that could crack planets, antimatter warheads that could sterilize entire star systems, defensive systems that made human space essentially impregnable. Admiral Yejin Choi met them at the Strategic Planning Center, where massive displays showed military movements across the galaxy. The intelligence-gathering capability was impressive. Earth seemed to know more about what was happening in Council space than the Council itself did. "Admiral Choi," Zelkiron said, trying to establish some kind of rapport, "surely humanity doesn't intend to use all this military power for conquest. Your species has always stood for peace and protection of the innocent." Admiral Choi studied the Council delegate for a long moment. "Prime Counselor, in the past year we have received requests for military assistance from 437 different worlds. Some offered us territory, others offered resources, a few offered complete political submission in exchange for protection." She gestured to the strategic displays showing refugee movements and fleet positions. "The galaxy is learning what happens when the people who kept you safe decide they're tired of being taken for granted." The negotiations resumed the next day, but the atmosphere had changed. The Council delegates now understood that they were not negotiating with the same humanity that had once served the Council faithfully. This was a transformed species that had spent a year preparing for war. Secretary Kim presented Earth's terms with clinical precision. Full recognition of human sovereignty over all territories currently claimed by Earth and its colonies. Reparations totaling 5 trillion credits for 50 years of unpaid military service. Complete autonomy for all human military operations. And formal acknowledgement that the Terran Federation is not bound by any Council laws or regulations. In exchange, Secretary Kim continued, Earth will consider limited defensive agreements with individual worlds that request our protection. Emphasis on individual worlds. We will not sign any agreements with the Council as an organization. Zelkiron was horrified by the terms. They would essentially dissolve what remained of Council authority and replace it with a collection of separate human protectorates. These terms would destroy the Council system entirely, he protested. The Council system is already destroyed, Secretary Kim replied. We're offering to help individual worlds survive what comes next. The negotiations stalled when the Council delegates revealed the true extent of the crisis. Beyond the chaos, already consuming the galaxy, something far worse was coming. Long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements beyond the galactic rim, Zelkaron admitted reluctantly. The Shadow Collective has returned from exile. They command technology that makes our most advanced weapons look primitive. Admiral Choi studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The Shadow Collective was not interested in conquest or resources. They wanted the complete extinction of all biological life in the galaxy. How long before they reach inhabited systems? She asked. Our best estimates suggest 6 months, War Speaker Thromdock replied. Maybe less if they push their ships harder than we expect. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The galactic chaos that had followed humanity's withdrawal was nothing compared to what the Shadow Collective would bring. They were not raiders or rebels or ancient enemies seeking revenge. They were extinction itself. Secretary Kim looked at the intelligence data for several minutes before responding. The Council's final offer? Complete independence for humanity, Zelkaron said desperately. Significant territorial concessions, full sovereignty over your military forces. All we ask in return is help against this existential threat. President Kyung-Soo Lee had been listening to the entire negotiation through secure communications. Now he entered the conference room personally, flanked by his security detail. Prime Counselor Zelkaron, President Lee said calmly, War Speaker Thromdock, you have presented your case eloquently, but I have a question for you. The council delegates waited nervously. The galaxy spent 50 years teaching humanity that mercy is weakness, President Lee continued. You treated us as disposable weapons. You used us to suppress anyone who inconvenienced you. You never asked our opinions, never valued our input, never treated us as equals. President Lee walked to the window overlooking the massive shipyards where Earth's new fleet was taking shape. Now you face extinction, and you want us to show you the mercy you never showed others. You want us to fight this threat for you, while offering us concessions you should have given us decades ago. Tell me, honored delegates, why should we care? What happens to species that saw us as nothing more than attacked dogs? Zelkaron opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. What could he say? Everything President Lee had said was true. The delegation departed Earth empty-handed. Behind them, humanity continued its military buildup, but their intentions remained unclear. Would they help save the galaxy, or would they let it burn? The answer would determine whether galactic civilization survived the coming darkness. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the galaxy burned in ways no one had imagined possible. The Shadow Collective had launched their final offensive, and species after species fell to their relentless advance like wheat before a cosmic harvester. War Commander Noctar of the dying Epsilon Federation transmitted his final message from the bridge of his flagship as shadow ships tore through his home system. His people had been warriors for 10,000 years, but nothing in their history had prepared them for this. The darkness takes everything, Noctar's voice crackled through space as his ship's hull began to buckle under enemy fire. Our worlds burn. Our children scream. The shadows consume all life they touch. Even Earth cannot stand alone against this. His transmission cut off as his ship exploded, taking with it the last organized resistance in the Epsilon sector. 12 billion beings died in the space of 6 hours as shadow ships methodically sterilized every planet in the system. On Luna Base, Intelligence Director Sang-Yun Jung monitored the shadow advance through Earth's deep space sensor network. The enemy moved with terrifying efficiency, leaving nothing alive behind them. This was not conquest. It was extermination on a galactic scale. They're not taking prisoners or resources, Sang-Yun reported to Earth Command. Every world they hit goes completely dark. No communications, no life signs, nothing. They're wiping out entire ecosystems down to the bacterial level. But humanity had not been standing alone, despite what War Commander Noctar believed. While The Council fractured and fought among themselves. Earth had been quietly building something entirely different: the Terran Commonwealth. Director of Colonial Affairs Sang Yun-jung had overseen humanity's most ambitious project during their 2 years of independence. Instead of trying to rebuild the old council system, Earth had been forming alliances with non-council species, refugees from fallen worlds, and even former council members who were willing to accept genuine partnership rather than human dominance. The Kepler Mining Consortium had been the first to join. These were the same rebels the Council had wanted humanity to suppress 2 years ago, the families fighting to protect their ancestors' burial grounds from strip mining operations. Now they worked alongside human engineers to mass-produce weapons and ships. Chief Engineer Youngmin Kim worked 18-hour shifts in the joint production facilities on Kepler Prime. Human technology merged with Kepler industrial capacity and alien material sciences to create weapons that no single species could have built alone. The Kepler gravity mines are unlike anything we've ever developed, Youngman reported during his weekly briefing to Earth Command. Their people understand how to manipulate planetary magnetic fields in ways that would take us decades to figure out. Combined with our antimatter technology, we can create weapons that tear space itself apart. Admiral Hein Cho commanded the largest fleet in galactic history, but it was not just human ships flying under Earth's banner. The Commonwealth fleet included vessels from dozens of species united by a simple recognition. Humanity offered something. The Council never could. The Kepler Vengeance flew alongside the human dreadnought Busan Thunder. The crystalline ship Shard of Hope from the Crystal Refugee Collective maintained formation with Earth's carrier Incheon Pride. Former enemies had become genuine allies, bound together by mutual respect rather than fear or dominance. Captain Jae-hyun Moon commanded one of the Commonwealth's mixed-species battle groups during the first successful counterattack against shadow forces at the Meridian Line. His fleet included ships from 12 different species, each contributing their unique capabilities to the fight. Formation Alpha 7, execute gravity mine deployment, Captain Moon ordered as shadow ships approached his position. The Kepler vessels released their exotic weapons, while human ships provided covering fire and crystal ships used their natural abilities to bend light around the entire formation. The Shadow Collective had expected to face the same divided, weak galaxy they had left behind centuries ago. Instead, they encountered a unified force that fought with desperate determination and innovative tactics they had never seen before. Strategic Coordinator Hee Jin-yoon managed the Commonwealth's response from the command center on Terra Nova, humanity's first colony world that had been transformed into the Alliance's military headquarters. Unlike the rigid council hierarchy that had required approval from dozens of committees before taking any action, the Commonwealth operated as a true partnership. Vorthon bioweapon deployment successful in Sector 7, reported Commander Jae-won Park from the Seoul Defender. Enemy ships are showing signs of system failure. Crystal ships are moving in for finishing strikes. The Vorthan clans had joined the Commonwealth after their homeworld was liberated from Council occupation forces. Their people specialized in biological warfare, creating viruses and toxins that could disable enemy technology. The Crystal Communes contributed their mastery of energy manipulation and light-based weapons. Each species brought strengths that complemented human tactical coordination and industrial capacity. Fleet Intelligence Officer Sung-ho Pyo coordinated information from across the battle zone, tracking Shadow Fleet movements and identifying weaknesses in their formations. The Commonwealth had learned to fight as one organism with many different capabilities. Shadow forces are adapting faster than our models predicted, Seung-ho warned during the battle briefing. They're learning from each engagement and modifying their tactics, but they seem confused by our mixed species coordination. Their sensors are designed to track single-species fleets with predictable behavior patterns. The Shadow Collective's ancient tactical databases had no reference for how to fight an alliance where humans provided strategic coordination. Kelpers created gravitational weapons, crystals manipulated energy fields, and Vorthans deployed biological agents all at the same time. The Commonwealth's greatest advantage was that each species voluntarily contributed their best capabilities. The Council had always demanded tribute and obedience. The Commonwealth asked for partnership and received innovations that surprised even human scientists. Dr. Minseo Cha worked in the Joint Research Facility on Terra Nova, where human scientists collaborated with alien researchers to develop new technologies. The breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source: refugee children from a dozen different species playing together in the Commonwealth's integration centers. The kids naturally figured out something we've been struggling with for months, Dr. Cha reported excitedly. They were playing a game where each species used their natural abilities to solve puzzles that none of them could handle alone. That gave us the idea for the harmonic resonance weapon. The harmonic resonance weapon required precise coordination between human targeting systems, Kepler gravitational manipulation, crystal energy focusing, and Vorthan biological components. No single species could have created it, but working together they produced something that could disrupt shadow technology at the quantum level. Captain Sun-hee Ryu led the first test of the new weapon during the Battle of the Shattered Rings. Her mixed-species squadron approached a shadow stronghold that had been considered impregnable by conventional weapons. "All units, initiate harmonic sequence," Captain Ryu ordered. Human ships provided targeting data, while Kepler vessels created gravitational focus points. Crystal ships amplified and directed energy beams, while Vorthan bioships released quantum-active organisms that interfered with shadow shielding. The result was spectacular. The Shadow Fortress, which had withstood direct hits from antimatter, warheads simply came apart as its molecular bonds were disrupted by harmonic resonance. The Shadow Collective, facing defeat for the first time in their ancient history, began to retreat toward their strongholds beyond the galactic rim. But Grand Admiral Seokjin Han had prepared for this possibility. "All Commonwealth fleets, execute. Pursuit Protocol 7, Admiral Han ordered from his flagship New Seoul. The shadows are not escaping to regroup. We end this threat permanently." Commonwealth forces pursued the Shadow Fleet beyond the galactic rim, carrying the war to territories that had been the enemy's stronghold for millennia. Human ships led thus the way, but they were supported by allies who fought not just for survival, but for each other. The final confrontation took place in the void between galaxies, where shadow cities floated in the darkness like malignant tumors. These ancient structures had been built over eons, designed to be completely impregnable to any attack. The Commonwealth fleet arrived to find shadow defenses that stretched across light years, energy barriers that could stop entire fleets, platforms that fired dark matter projectiles, automated systems that had been perfected over millions of years of warfare. Admiral Haiyan Cho stood on the bridge of the Commonwealth flagship Unity, surrounded by officers from a dozen different species. The diversity that the old council had seen as weakness was now the Commonwealth's greatest strength. "All species, all ships, all warriors of the Commonwealth," Admiral Cho broadcast to the massive fleet. "Today we fight not for territory or resources or political power. We fight for the right of life to exist in this universe. We fight for our children, for our futures, for each other." The battle began with shadow weapons that distorted reality itself, the same technology that had broken council fleets for centuries. But the Commonwealth responded with tactics and weapons that no single species could have developed alone. Kepler ships created gravitational anomalies that twisted space around shadow platforms. Crystal vessels bent light and energy to create impossible attack angles. Vorthan bioweapons infected shadow technology with quantum viruses. Human ships coordinated everything while providing the raw firepower needed to exploit each opening. Commander Hyun-soo Im led a desperate assault on the primary shadow command structure, his ship loaded with harmonic resonance weapons that could theoretically destabilize the entire enemy stronghold. The mission required him to fly through defenses that had never been breached. "Commonwealth control. This is Daegu's hammer," Commander Im reported as his ship took heavy damage from shadow fire. "I'm seeing the target. Initiating final approach. Tell my family I'm proud to serve with all of you." His ship disappeared in a flash of light that could be seen across the battlefield. When the glare faded, the massive Shadow Command structure was collapsing in on itself, its ancient technology finally defeated by an alliance the Shadows had never imagined possible. The victory came not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through something the ancient Shadows had never encountered. Species fighting not for dominance or survival alone, but for each other. The Commonwealth had proven that unity through mutual respect was stronger than any empire built on fear and oppression. The old council was dead, but something better had taken its place. The galaxy would never be the same again. The final battle took place at Terra Nova, humanity's first colony world that had become the Commonwealth's military headquarters. Supreme Commander Jimin Lee stood on the command deck of the massive battle station New Seoul, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled for what everyone knew would be the decisive confrontation. The Shadow Collective had gathered every ship from their ancient armada for one last, desperate assault. Dark Admiral Morthul commanded forces that literally darkened the stars themselves, vessels powered by technologies that existed before most galactic civilizations had learned to make fire. Through the communication systems that connected every Commonwealth ship, Dark Admiral Morthul broadcast his final ultimatum to the assembled fleet. His voice carried the weight of eons, speaking in tones that seemed to drain hope from anyone who heard them. "Biological creatures of this dying galaxy," Morthul announced, "you have fought beyond your capabilities and delayed the inevitable, but extinction comes for all organic life. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift. Resist further, and you will suffer for millennia before the darkness claims you." Supreme Commander Jimin Lee had prepared his response carefully. It would be broadcast not just to the Commonwealth fleet, but to every surviving world in the galaxy. This message would define what humanity and their allies stood for. "Dark Admiral Morthul," Commander Lee replied, his voice steady and clear, "this is humanity speaking for the Commonwealth of Free Worlds. You call us biological creatures as if life were a weakness. You offer us swift death as if it were mercy, but you misunderstand what you face here today. The Commonwealth fleet stretched across space in formations that included ships from dozens of species. Human dreadnoughts flew alongside Kepler mining vessels converted to warships. Crystal Commune light benders maintained position with Vorten. Bioships and refugee vessels from 100 worlds. We have spent 50 years being told we were too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous for civilized space," Commander Lee continued. "Today, you will learn why that was never an insult. It was a warning. But our violence serves life, not death. Our aggression protects the innocent, not destroys them. And our danger comes from our refusal to let others face extinction alone." The battle began with the Shadow Collective's signature weapon, reality distortion fields that had broken every fleet the Old Council had ever sent against them. Space itself twisted around Commonwealth ships as the Shadows tried to tear them apart at the molecular level. But the Commonwealth's response revealed humanity's greatest discovery during their years of independence. They had learned to weaponize, not just their aggression, but their ability to unite others in common cause. Captain Minji Kang led the first wave of the attack, her ship Soul's Vengeance loaded with experimental weapons that turned shadow technology against itself. Her squadron included volunteers from every species in the Commonwealth, all willing to face certain death for the chance to protect their families. "All ships, execute Pattern Omega," Captain Kang ordered as her squadron dove straight into the heart of the Shadow Fleet. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every child who will be born after today, every world that will see sunrise tomorrow, every dream that deserves a chance to become real." Her ships disappeared into the enemy formation, but the explosions that followed showed that their sacrifice had meaning. Shadow vessels that had seemed invulnerable began to show damage as their own reality distortion weapons were turned back on them. Commander Tae-Hoon-Oh coordinated simultaneous attacks across 17 different dimensions, using allied species' natural abilities to fight on battlefields the Shadows had never imagined. The ethereal communes could exist partially outside normal space. The quantum dancers could manipulate probability itself. Each species contributed capabilities that no single enemy could prepare for. Dimensional strike successful, Commander O reported as shadow formations began to collapse. The enemy was prepared to fight in 3 dimensions. They can't handle attacks that come from directions that don't technically exist. The tide truly turned when Admiral Yoon Jong-shin revealed humanity's ultimate secret. They had been in contact with other galaxies, other human colonies that had spread beyond even shadow collective knowledge. As the battle reached its climax, reinforcements arrived not from within their galaxy, but from beyond it. The Andromeda's Pride led a fleet of human ships from the neighboring galaxy, commanded by Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been fighting shadow forces in distant star systems for decades. Behind her came vessels from the Magellanic Commonwealth and the Triangulum Alliance, human colonies that had grown into galactic powers in their own right. "Sorry we're late," Admiral Chen broadcast as her ships joined the battle. "We had to deal with shadow outposts in our own territories first, but we're here now, and we brought friends." The friends included species that the local galaxy had never seen, beings who had evolved under different stars but shared the same commitment to life that drove the Commonwealth. The Shadows found themselves facing not just one galaxy's worth of united peoples, but an intergalactic alliance they had never known existed. Grand Admiral Seokjin Han coordinated the combined fleets from his position aboard New Seoul. The tactical display showed forces that spanned multiple galaxies, all working together to defeat an enemy that had terrorized the universe for eons. "All fleets, all species, all warriors of life," Admiral Han broadcast. "Execute final assault pattern. Today, we don't just defend our homes, we liberate the universe itself from an ancient darkness." The Shadow Collective made one last desperate attempt to escape, trying to retreat to strongholds beyond known space. But the Commonwealth had learned too much about their enemy's nature. The Shadows were not just invaders, they were a plague that would spread wherever they were allowed to survive. Captain Hyejin Seo led the pursuit fleet that chased shadow survivors into the void between galaxies. Her orders were simple and absolute. No shadow ship could be allowed to escape and rebuild their forces elsewhere. "This ends here," Captain Seo announced as her ships surrounded the last shadow stronghold. "No more running, no more hiding, no more threatening innocent lives across the universe." The final victory came not through superior weapons or overwhelming numbers, but through something the ancient shadows had never learned to understand. The Commonwealth fought not for territory or power, but for each other. When shadow forces tried to break their formation by targeting individual ships, other vessels immediately moved to protect them. When the Kepler ship Ancestor's memory took critical damage, human and crystal ships formed a protective barrier around it. When the Vorthon bioship Life's Fury lost its weapons, ethereal vessels shared their energy to keep it fighting. The Shadows had built their entire strategy around dividing their enemies, but the Commonwealth could not be divided. In the aftermath of the final battle, the old Galactic Council formally dissolved itself in a ceremony broadcast to every surviving world. Chancellor Nyan Choi, representing the Commonwealth's provisional government, presided over the end of an era and the beginning of something unprecedented. The council was built on the idea that some species were more important than others, Chancellor Choi announced to the assembled delegates. It maintained peace through fear and enforced order through violence. That system has died, and something better will take its place. Director Dong Junyu oversaw the integration process that transformed former enemies into genuine partners. The species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive warmongers now worked alongside human administrators to build a government based on equality rather than dominance. The crystal hegemony, which had once considered itself superior to all biological life, now contributed their energy manipulation abilities to Commonwealth infrastructure projects. The draconian survivors, humbled by their complete defeat, offered their ancient knowledge of stellar engineering to help rebuild damaged worlds. Even the former council species found places in the new order. The Altarians used their artistic abilities to design memorials for those lost in the Shadow War. The Centaurians trained Commonwealth military forces, finally learning what it meant to fight for others rather than just for glory. President Kangmin so delivered the Commonwealth's founding address from Earth, standing in the same office where humanity's withdrawal from the Council had been announced 3 years earlier. The holographic displays behind him showed construction projects on 1,000 worlds as the galaxy rebuilt itself. "We didn't leave the Council to abandon the galaxy," President So announced to the billions watching across hundreds of star systems. "We left to save it. The old way, where one species dominated while others followed, led only to weakness and division. The new way, where all species stand together as equals, will lead us to the stars themselves." The Commonwealth's first major decision was to establish exploration fleets that would carry their message beyond their own galaxy. Explorer Captain Ariam Kwan prepared humanity's first expedition to the distant Triangulum galaxy, but she would not be carrying conquest or colonization. "We go not as conquerors, but as teachers," Captain Kwan explained to her mixed-species crew. "We carry the promise of the Commonwealth, that no species need stand alone in the darkness. That cooperation is stronger than domination. That life is more powerful than death." The Terran Commonwealth had proven that diversity was not weakness but strength. That unity did not require uniformity. That the best way to achieve peace was not through fear, but through hope. As Explorer Captain Kwan's ship Harmony's Dawn departed for distant galaxies, it carried with it the most dangerous idea in the universe: that all intelligent life deserved respect, freedom, and the chance to reach for the stars together. The Commonwealth had learned why humanity was truly dangerous. Not because they were violent, but because they refused to let others face extinction alone. Not because they conquered, but because they inspired. Not because they dominated, but because they united. The galaxy had been transformed, and the universe would never be the same. The age of empires built on fear and oppression was over. The age of cooperation and mutual respect had begun, and in the endless void between galaxies, new civilizations would soon learn that they were not alone, and that there were people willing to stand with them against any darkness that might come. Ambassador Jiho Kim walked through the massive crystal hallways of the Galactic Council Station. His black diplomatic uniform felt heavy on his shoulders, weighted down by 50 years of service to beings who barely saw him as more than a useful tool. The artificial gravity here was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like he was floating just above the polished floor. The council chamber doors stretched 30 meters high, carved from a single piece of blue crystal that came from the homeworld of the Altarians. Jiho had been through these doors hundreds of times, always carrying orders for humanity to fight someone else's war. Today would be different. Inside the chamber, delegates from over 1,000 different worlds filled the curved seats that rose up like a massive amphitheater. Some looked almost human, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were so alien that Jiho still couldn't figure out which end was their head after decades of meetings. They all had one thing in common, though. They all expected humans to do their dirty work. Minho Park stood beside Jiho's chair, his tablet showing tactical displays of the latest mission the council wanted to assign. Minho was young for a military advisor, only 35, but he had seen enough orbital bombardments to make him look older. His hands shook slightly as he scrolled through the targeting data. "The civilian casualties will be enormous," Minho whispered to Jiho in Korean. "They want us to hit refugee camps. They're calling them rebel strongholds, but the intelligence clearly shows families with children." Jiho nodded without looking at the tablet. He had already seen the reports. Yuna Lee, their intelligence officer, had been feeding him classified information for months. The pattern was always the same. The Council would find a problem, label it a threat to galactic peace, and send human fleets to eliminate it with overwhelming force. The Vorthak representative clicked forward on his insect-like legs. Kelthanor was 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had been warriors once, but they had given up fighting when they joined the Council 200 years ago. Now they preferred to let humans do their fighting for them. "Honored delegates," Kelthanor's voice came through the translation system as a series of musical tones. "We face another crisis that threatens the stability our Council has maintained for centuries. The mining world of Kepler 442b has erupted in violent rebellion against lawful mining operations. Holographic displays filled the air above the chamber floor. Jiho watched as images of the mining world appeared, vast strip mines that had turned green forests into brown wasteland. The miners were taking everything valuable from the planet, leaving nothing but poisoned soil and dead rivers. "The rebels have attacked mining equipment and threatened the safety of off-world workers," Kelthanor continued. "They claim the mining operations are destroying sites sacred to their primitive culture. This cannot be allowed to continue. The stability of the entire sector depends on the resources from this world." More images appeared. Jiho saw the rebels, families carrying homemade weapons, farmers with tools converted into simple guns, children barely old enough to walk hiding, behind barricades made from furniture. These were not soldiers. These were people trying to protect their homes. "The Council requests that the Terran Federation deploy appropriate forces to restore order," Kelthanor announced. "Standard suppression protocols should be sufficient. Orbital bombardment of rebel strongholds, followed by ground occupation to ensure compliance." Jiho stood slowly. Around the chamber, delegates turned their attention to him. Some looked bored. They had seen this same routine countless times. Others leaned forward with interest, eager to see how quickly the humans would agree to handle another problem for them. "Before I respond to this request," Jiho said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "I have a question for the honored delegates." A murmur went through the crowd. Humans were supposed to accept their assignments without questions. That was how the system worked. In the past year, the Terran Federation has conducted 46 military operations at the request of this council, Jiho continued. Each time, we were told these operations were necessary for the good of all species. Each time, we were told that only human forces had the capability to handle these threats. The chamber was getting quieter. Even the delegates who had been chatting among themselves were starting to pay attention. "I have reviewed the intelligence reports for all 46 operations," Jiho said. "In 31 cases, the targets were civilian populations whose only crime was resisting the economic policies of council member species. In 12 cases, we were asked to suppress independence movements on worlds that had been colonized without their consent. In the remaining 3 cases, we destroyed entire ecosystems to clear land for resource extraction." Yuna Lee sat in the observer section, her face carefully neutral. She had been the one to compile those reports, digging through classified files to show Jiho the truth about what humanity had been doing in the name of galactic peace. "The pattern is clear," Jiho said. "The Council does not call on human forces to defend the innocent or protect the weak. You call on us when you need someone killed and you want to keep your own hands clean." The Altarian delegate, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid named Veltara, activated her speaking platform. "Ambassador Kim, surely you understand that these operations serve the greater good. The stability of galactic civilization requires difficult decisions sometimes. Who's greater good? Jiho asked. The mining companies who strip worlds bare? The trading cartels who exploit primitive species? The colonial administrations who treat entire populations as slave labor? Angry voices started rising from different parts of the chamber. This was not how council sessions were supposed to go. Humans were supposed to take their orders and leave. Minho stepped closer to Jiho, his hand moving unconsciously toward his sidearm. The tension in the chamber was growing dangerous. Some of the more aggressive species were making threatening gestures, and security forces were moving into position around the exits. For 50 years, Jiho said, raising his voice above the noise, humanity has served as the Council's military force. We have fought your wars, conquered your enemies, and carried out your executions. We have done this because we believed we were part of something greater than ourselves. The chamber was falling, silent again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. This was the silence that came before violence. But we were never part of this council, Jiho continued. We were your weapons, tools to be used and put away when the job was done. You gave us targets and expected us to destroy them without question. You never asked us to help build anything. You never asked us to create or protect or heal. You only asked us to kill. Kelthanor clicked his claws together in irritation. Ambassador Kim, if you have concerns about specific operations, there are proper channels for review. But the current crisis requires immediate action. Will the Terran Federation accept this assignment or not? Jiho looked around the chamber one more time. He saw species that had grown fat and comfortable while humans did their fighting for them. He saw beings who spoke of peace and civilization while ordering the destruction of anyone who inconvenienced them. He saw the faces of creatures who thought humans existed only to serve their needs. He reached up and unpinned the Earth insignia from his uniform collar. The small blue and green disc had been worn by every human ambassador for 5 decades. It represented humanity's place in the galactic community, their acceptance as a junior partner in the great work of civilization.